Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to you all after the break. Hope you had a good one. I know it was small, but we want to stay on schedule for the rest of the program. I'm Apurva. I'm the founder and director of Animal Law and Policy Network. We're the co-organizers of this event along with Asia for Animals, Farmed Animal Coalition, Samayu Animal Law Center, and Fish Welfare Initiative. Welcome to our next session on making plant-based protein accessible. I have the pleasure of inviting the moderator for the next session, who will then introduce his panel. Our moderator for this session is Mr. Abhishek Sinha, who is the founder and CEO of Good Dot, India's pioneer plant-based meat company. An ex-IRS officer, he quit the civil services to follow his passion for making sustainable, cost-effective alternatives to animal products. Abhishek's passion for animals and interest in food innovation drives his endeavors to revolutionize India's protein market by mainstreaming compassionate food choices. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Mr. Sinha. The virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Apurva. Glad to be here. I think it's great to be a part of this panel. I think there's a lot of information which needs to be disseminated regarding plant protein, and more so the topic of being affordable plant protein in India. So to begin with, I'd like to just introduce the panelists for this important session. We have Aarohi Surya with us. She is the CEO and co-founder of Dancing Cows with a brand name Otish, which is essentially a great alternative to dairy in the form of oat milk and drinks. Aarohi has headed HTC in marketing in Middle East and Africa earlier, and she had also exited from a plant-based venture in Dubai, which was called Yala Veggie, which was world's first digital meat-free mall. So she brings a lot of experience both from a online marketplace as well as a plant-based dairy brand. Then we have Aiyanna Belliappa with us, who is an alumni of Erasmus University, Rotterdam, and he is the Senior Innovation and Entrepreneurship Specialist at GFI India. And he is expert in collaboration between startups, investors, accelerators, and incubators. So he'll bring in that great, policy as well as the hub between investor and the startup, that experience into this discussion. And finally, we have Rashmit Arora, who is a BS and MS from Penn State University. He has worked with US Department of Agriculture and also taught in the Penn State University. Currently in India, he is the co-founder of Gracious Granny, which is a plant-forward Mexican cafe, which is operating successfully at multiple locations in Mumbai. So welcome, guys. If you could, just give some other introduction of yours to our audience, it will be great. If you can start with Aarohi.
Hi, Abhishek. I believe you gave a very precise and quite crisp introduction. I don't have to add anything to that. But I'm happy to be here and interact with everyone, Aiyanna, Rashmit, and Abhishek, all of you, and happy to take all the questions we might have here.
Sure. Looking forward, Aarohi. Aiyanna, if you could kindly first few words.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Abhishek. That was indeed following up on Aarohi's point. That was a really great introduction. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be part of this event and to talk to so many people. Of course, Abhishek did a good job about introducing me, but a little bit about what Good Food Institute does is we're a think tank and a non-profit working on the verticals of the alt protein sector in general. Happy to talk in detail about the work that we do and how we support the all protein sector in general. But thank you once again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Aiyanna. Looking forward. Rashmit.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. And Apurva. The intro was spot on, and if I can just add something that will give people more context as I'm speaking, that would be is that my background is in environmental and behavioral economics, and I also used to work at Mercy for Animals in the US as an ag economist prior to this. So a lot of my answers might be economic sounding.
Great. Welcome, Rashmit. So to start with, friends, I just want to lay it out there that A lot of information is available about the plant-based protein space over the internet, in the media, but this space is evolving. So what has been written is just a post-mortem of certain strategies. That's not the real picture which is exactly emerging. So take every report with a pinch of salt, both positive as well as negative. We'll try to declutter the noise for you about this very, very important space. And before we dive into the specific discussion, from our own experience at Good Dot, we are fairly confident that India story will be very different from the world story, because India, by its very nature, there's a lot of cultural tailwind for ethical, sustainable, and healthy food products, which is a great strength for the Indian market. Also, India is an extremely protein deficient nation. 72% of Indian, by various reports, are protein deficient. And that is a great opportunity for alternative proteins as well as plant-based dairy to really fill that particular gap. Again, if we look at the space, let's understand the space, plant-based protein. Normally, it is assumed that the plant-based protein is specifically just the plant-based meat or dairy alternatives. They are an important new part of this much larger space of plant protein. So we break it into three parts. One, which is naturally plant-based protein, the lentils. I would say so many, kidney beans and whole food plant-based products which carry a lot of protein. So that's a big space and it's already being used. It's not being fitted into the plant protein narrative, but we are the largest consumer, producer, and importer of lentils. So India is already heavy into plant-based protein. So that's one. The second is a textured product. For example, soy chunks, soya chop, which has not gone into the organized space as much as some of the other consumer products, but that's a massive market in India with all across consumption of that particular product. And finally, the new products, which are alternatives, which are improved version of textured products and dairy alternatives, which are the new age products. So now this space is comprising of all these three segments. And if you even as on date, if you combine all these three segments, this is a massive, massive space which can only grow from here and will never go back. So we do believe it's a massive market out there. So that setting that context in place, while we have this conversation with all the panelists and they will bring in their experience, along with we'll also share what we have learned at Good Dot, selling in the rural parts of India, in the most luxurious properties of India, and even outside of India. I think that could be some giving you certain insights. So to start with, I'll just go to Aiyanna, and if you could kindly give us a brief overview of the space of plant-based industry, how you're seeing from a GFI perspective, what do you make out of this space?
No, thanks, Abhishek. And you really put that super well in terms of what plant protein is. And definitely from my view, and given the liberty of working at JFI India, I do get to look at the sector as a whole. And I'd love to break it down in terms of where we are. But before that, in terms of a definition, like for everyone there that isn't completely aware of it, but from our point of view, a definition of a plant-based category is essentially products that aim to biomimic conventionally animal-derived proteins, and they use the plant as the building block for this. So most of course, I'm sitting with innovators here today. They'll be able to love to tell you in terms of the innovations that they've come up with, but the entire sector is working on these plant-derived ingredients to sort of mimic the taste, texture, and the nutrition aspect of conventionally produced animal products. So, of course, your milk, your eggs, your meat are your typically bigger categories of what we call as animal protein products that we get. But similarly, like animal products, these are composed of like protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, waters, and I'd love to like at any point of this point share nutritional facts about the plant-based sector as well. And as Abhishek rightly said, like it's definitely to look into this and understand on a factual point of view what the sector is and definitely what these products are there. But as a whole, on a climate perspective, on various human beneficial perspectives as well we believe that the plant-based sector and plant-based products will soon enough be almost conventional to animal-derived proteins. But enough of that in terms of like what is the definition, and of course the innovators here will tell you more in terms of their definitions of their products that they have. But in India, and Abhishek pointed it really well, in India, we are perfectly positioned to actually make the plant-based sector really big, almost a very, very important part of what India is going to do for the sector going forward. Just to touch upon, we do have a huge agrarian base, and we do have a great talent pool as well that work already in the sector. And also, it's not a new phenomenon anymore. It's actually an age-old phenomenon for Indians. We've eaten soy, we've eaten soya chop that's almost produced there. But this, from our definition, is definitely what the initial aspects of the sector is, and what the next level is, or what Abhishek rightly put it as, what are the next alternatives that are going to come up. That's where we're seeing a lot of innovation in the sector. And similarly, not only in India, this is a global phenomenon. I was just before this, I was prepping some notes for this. In India alone, we have about 110 startups that work in the all protein sector as a whole. Out of those 110 that are on our databases, of course, there are some that are work parallelly to the oil protein sector. Almost 70% of them actually work in the plant-based meat sector, or the plant-based sector as a whole. And this is, of course, Aarohi here, who's working in plant-based dairy, Abhishek here with Good Dot. All of these are sectors that we're working in terms of replacing milk, in replacing meat, as well as some companies replacing egg. But I hope that gives you a good, clear idea of the number of companies that are working, and it's significantly similarly to our global counterparts. The plant-based sector is definitely in terms of the number of companies working there ahead of the fermentation of the cultivated sector. Anyway, I'm not going to touch upon that, but focusing back onto the plant-based sector, looking at some of the investment numbers as well. Up till 2024 and from 2017, there were about $32.4 million invested into this sector. And the plant-based sector leads this way with almost $27 million. So almost more than 80% of all investments in the sector in India have gone into the plant-based sector, as well as the companies. But overall, what we're seeing as an innovation specialist is looking at the sector as a whole. This sector is growing, and it continues to grow quite rapidly in India. India is primarily positioned well enough, both with its agrarian base as well as its talent pool, as well as its infrastructure capabilities, to really make some big strides in the next couple of years. I hope that gives you a good overall understanding of the sector, Abhishek, and would love to like touch upon points that are brought by all the panelists here today.
No, sure. Aiyanna, thanks for the detailed overview. And one thing what we have learned here at Good Dot, and that is through trial and error, and getting certain consumer feedback as well as resistance, is that we let plant protein stay in the dimension of plant protein. Let us give the power to the consumer to say whether it is a meat alternative or a dairy alternative. Because I'll give you an example. So we had a great, earlier, most of our product had a similar name to meat, what they were trying to replicate, right? So when you look at it, there are only two segment of consumers. Very granular detail is either it's a vegetarian or a meat eater. So now let's look at these two segment of consumers. And if say Good Dot is selling, say, a plant protein mock chicken, for example, a vegetarian for obvious reason will say that, you know what, I don't have to anything do with it. Especially if you look at age granularity, young people, vegetarian might give it a shot, but people in the middle age to senior age will neither touch it just because of the nomenclature. So you are, once you name it like meat, you are essentially alienating a small, significant section of consumer by just terming it as meat. That being said, when we come to the second segment, is the meat eaters. So I have been an ex-meat eater. I left it in 2013. But at that time, if someone would have brought me a plant-based meat or plant-based mutton or a chicken, I would have taken it as a challenge. That, okay, you're trying to fool me. Let me taste it and prove to you that you cannot fool me. So I am going with a negative mindset. And even if I enjoy the taste, I will focus on the difference between the plant-based meat product and the actual meat products. So my eventual feedback will be, you know what, gap है, मजा नहीं आया. मतलब इसमें मटन तो है नहीं, chicken है नहीं, even though you might have enjoyed. So this is where soya chop has taken a great route, or soya chunk has taken a great route. that they left it for the consumers to take a call on, ki, Bhaiya, do you want it as a meat replacement or not? So our effort in the plant-based meat space should be create product very close to meat, but keep a neutral name. Leave the guys to take the ownership of the product and say that यार ये mutton जैसा लग रहा है या ये chicken जैसा लग रहा है. So let the consumer take the ownership. So this is what we learned. And Tips Frankie, we launched a product with them, which was great, which they named a separate category. So they have a red sleeve for a non-veg roll. They have a dark green sleeve for a veg roll, and they have come up with a light green sleeve where they put the roll, and they have named a Proti Roti. So now everyone is invited. So there is no benchmarking in terms of taste, even though our effort now to come back to good dot is to take out animals from the meat system. We are not about health, we are not about environment, we are solely about animals. Animals don't deserve to die to be on our plate, but that is our soul. That cannot be our pitch to the consumer, because consumer will eventually warm up to these messaging. But initially they are value maximizers. So how you are going to give them a product which meets their value proposition in terms of taste and price? So that is what we are focusing on. So I think that's going to be very important for any new company or existing company to be in the space based upon our learnings. And it's very typical of India. Maybe outside India, the word meat will not be so much polarizing because they eat meat a lot. But in India, it's a very polarizing word. So that being said, so now we come to Aarohi. So can you give a brief overview of the plant-based dairy space, Aarohi, since you're already in this space?
Sure, Abhishek. So, plant-based dairy in India is actually in a very fascinating phase. I mean, it is still growing, but it's still a niche. Awareness is definitely, increasing, but keeping all the competitions and keeping all the brands in consideration, I believe that affordability and taste will always remain the biggest barriers. Um, of late, I've seen a trend that consumers are more and more open to trying plant-based milk, but repeat purchase depend on whether it fits seamlessly into their routine. Because India is a very diverse kind of a country, so what works in say UAE or what works in the West would never work here in India. Because the product has to deeply align, as you mentioned, in their day-to-day routines and what they have been used to consume. But on the brighter side, I feel there are bigger players who are about to enter the market, and they will be legitimizing this category. And honestly, quick commerce has made plant-based dairy, more accessible than ever. There are a lot of health conscious consumers, especially millennials and late Gen Zs, that I believe are leading the change, especially those with lactose intolerance. When you compare plant based dairy to plant based meat, I believe that plant based dairy is a larger market, catering to a larger market audience, only because, lactose intolerance is a big concern now, especially after post COVID. A lot of consumers, a lot of people are getting more and more aware about their health concerns, their allergies. uh, you know they want to upgrade to a better alternative. So that's the reason why plant-based dairy has been growing at a bigger scale than plant-based meat. And also of late, I've seen that a lot of consumers believe in purpose-driven brands. Sustainability is a very strong motivator, but we're still long way from mass adoption. The plant-based dairy industry still needs a lot more education, price parity, and I believe better government policies to truly take off. Though the trend is very clear, plant-based dairy is no longer, just for but vegans or you know people. I mean, people who are vegans, but it's also for niche urban consumers. It's slowly making its way into mainstream conversations as well. Seeing a lot of people, I mean, a lot of celebrities have been switching to, oat milk, almond milk of late, and the market has, I believe, expanded to not just catering to vegans, but it's bigger than what we think it is. Hopefully, I answered your question. So this is
No, I
what
think
plant-based dairy is in my understanding.
No, I think, thank you, Aarohi. I think that makes a lot of sense that there is an increasing demand. There is a latent demand in the space. How, brands, both small and big, are going to cater to that demand. I think that is, up for grabs in terms of strategy. Lactose intolerance is a great way to go, which is again, non-polarizing mindset, because India, I think there is a cultural a tailwind for dairy. So, if you go and approach someone and say that, what, this is not good for you, dahi or maybe butter or ghee, malab, it's very difficult to convince them, right? But, I do believe a lot of Indians are lactose intolerant, and we accept our lack of digestion, that ki mera digestion hi kharab hai. I get bloated, or maybe I have, some motion issues because of, but they do not realize that it could potentially be an allergen, and this could also be a lactose intolerance. So I think more education is needed on that side. Now, continuing on your aspect of plant-based dairy, I do believe Rashmit has got some very interesting insights and interesting practices in Gracious Granny in this phase. So I'd like to bring in Rashmit into this part of conversation. Yeah, Rashmit.
Yeah, thank you. So Gracias Granny does do things a bit differently. We're a plant-forward restaurant. We're not a vegan restaurant, and that's by intention. The idea is that the core of the problem is that you need to get non-vegans to the table, right? You need to approach them, and you need to somehow get them to explore alternatives. So at Gracias Granny, we do quite a few things differently. One of the things is that oat milk is the default in our coffees, but we do offer cow's milk. We charge extra for cow's milk instead, right? So what that does is, it, even if price point is an issue, let's say, right, then the person is going for oat milk as the default, right? So at least it's inducing trial in some way. And if they like the oat milk, right, then there might be some real life change in behavior outside. So, right, the next time maybe they're sitting at home ordering something from quick commerce, like Aarohi said, they might search for oat milk instead of their regular cow's milk because they like the taste. So inducing trial is really important. And then, some of the things that you were mentioning, Abhishek, about like how Proti Roti is a separate name, all of that. So one of the biggest disadvantages I think that we have in India is this veg and non-veg dissection of menus, right? So inherently, every restaurant, every cafe will have a separate veg and a separate non-veg menu. And there are studies done by the World Resources Institute, Oxford, bunch of places, which show that just having these two separate menus plays into identities, right? And so if I'm a non-vegetarian, right, I will skip the veg section entirely and just go to the non-veg section and order from there. So instead, if you, let's say, just had one menu in which maybe you had chicken parmesan as an option, but then in the next line you had pan tossed king oyster mushrooms with garlic sauce or something, right? If it was in the same line, if it was in the same page, in the same section, right? Then I'm actually, even though I'm non-vegetarian, I'm more likely to order the king oyster mushroom versus if it's in a separate section altogether. So at Gracias Granny, we don't have any veg or non-veg sections. We have protein choices, right? And then we use different nudges too. So we actually did a study recently with the Bryant Research Group in the UK, which analyzed a bunch of tactics over a 6 month period at Gracias Granny, and we found very exciting results. So basically, things like descriptive language, the way that I described king oyster mushrooms more than I described chicken parmesan, right? That matters a lot, like, so how descriptive are you being? How appetizing are you making these items sound? Things like adding a simple chef's recommended sign next to the default plant-based option, right? So one of the things that we do is, next to the plant-based option, it'll be chef's default instead of just default written, which gives the consumer some, like, the confidence, okay, the chef is recommending it, it must taste good. So just different tactics like this to encourage adoption. Yeah.
I think very interesting, Rashmit. I do believe your background in behavioral economics does play a part in these experiments and with some very, very insightful results. And I'm happy that, you're finding some insights and, it'll be good that you share with, many of the other startups and the policy advocacy organizations so that they can amplify that message. I totally agree with you on the plant-based dairy part, 100%. I'm talking about the Indian context, but in India, it's a minefield to keep a chicken with a veg together on the menu. Because if by oversight someone orders, obviously Gracia's Granny is a very typical plant-forward cafe where much more evolved and people who are aware about the space are going to come. But imagine a small restaurant in say a small time city having a mixed menu of veg, meat, and non-plant based meat. That could be a massive challenge. So a bit of a modification for a mass adoption would be for dairy and non-dairy to be together because there's no religious sentiments attached and other cultural sentiments attached to it. But for meat, unless it's very clear or the serving staff or the management has not made it very clear, because many times even the intent might be there can be a problem in execution. So that can potentially, so it's not a one fit all solution for the meat part, but for dairy definitely is a one fit all solution, I feel. But just I'm just putting it out there. What could be a potential challenge in that? So anyway,
Yeah.
uh,
Can I
mm,
respond to that?
yes, please
Yeah.
go
So
ahead.
just, I mean, I completely agree, right? So one of the reasons why I think this strategy works for us is because we're also playing in a new cuisine that doesn't have a lot of expectation attached to
Yeah,
it. So we're
yeah,
a Mexican restaurant, right? So we're a
true,
Mexican cafe.
true.
So firstly, the knowledge in Mexican is only low, right?
Not much.
Versus if I were to do butter chicken versus butter plant-based chicken, that would be a completely
Yeah,
different ball game, right? So I
yeah,
completely agree on that front. It has to
totally.
be tailored to the context. But
Yeah.
with that being said, I do think that like this movement should think about categories that don't have much expectation attached to them but are still growing. Whether it's like, let's say matcha, right? I don't know if people know, but like Chayos, the chain, all their matcha is made in oat milk by default. Right? Just
Nice.
go and ask them. Like, it's made in oat milk. That's just the default introduction that they've done. So just like I feel like these categories where there aren't expectations attached are great to like utilize in order to change perceptions of plant-based foods.
No, I totally agree. I think very, very interesting insights what you have brought in. In fact, all of us know that there are hidden costs to animal protein and animal milk, right? Which is not charged to the consumer, right? Eventually, by your practice of keeping a dairy option to be at a higher price, you are nudging the consumer towards plant-based dairy, and also in a way you're also giving them the real picture in terms of the cost, overall costs, or which an animal-based products entails. So very interesting. I think that could be some takeaway for a lot of QSR chains also. I'm happy to note Chayo's the default in matcha is oat milk. That's fantastic. It's news to me, but that's what excites me, that so many things are happening which are not being reported. And if it is not being, as you said, polarized or reported, people are adopting it very casually, very naturally. So that is very, very relevant. And before we go to the next question, I think you also pointed out a very important thing. I think we need to highlight this, that you see many organizations in this space are very sentimental towards animal ethics. They are very supportive of animal ethics. But we have to also realize that they need to survive to make the change, to connect with the non-vegans. So while we totally understand sometimes the sentiments of people who say that okay, you cannot mix milk with a plant protein or any other cafe or QSR, or maybe in your case a plant forward setup, but they did need to understand that the real battle is for the animals. Many of the people and most of all of us are on the same side. There's no point in pulling anyone down. The much bigger battle is in front of us. So might as well support organizations who are trying to make a difference, try to understand their constraint, and you need not be okay with their strategy. But there's no point in pulling them down. If you have to put them down, put animal industry down rather than people who are working in the space. Again, now coming to Ayana, where do you see the large opportunities in the overall space of alternate smart proteins?
Oh, thanks, Abhishek. And as Rashmit put it, very interesting in terms of like looking at consumer adoption and like looking at the Mexican market. But just before that, I'm going to talk about in terms of an opportunity maybe earlier on in the value chain. Particularly, we're seeing a lot, and we also encourage for India. And I talked about this a little bit before, but India's rich agricultural background, right? To touch upon that, what we see as the future of this sector needs to match on three major elements, right? And in India, it's price, it's taste, and then it's convenience, right? You need to have the right price point reach, then you need to have a taste as good as it is, and convenience. It can't be, you could, as someone put it down on the chat box, you can go down to your local Kirana store or you can go down to your local store and get it immediately, right? So these are the three important factors for full adoption of all parts of the sector into mainstream. So having said that, all the innovations that we're sorting to see are under these three domains: the price, or either in taste or in convenience, right? In the price side, what excites us a lot is actually using India's agrarian base, right? I think last year India put out 109 high-yielding, resilient crop varieties that are climate vulnerable. The Indian government put this out. Many of these actually crops, actually like such as pulses, legumes, beans, etc., have real-life application into the oil proteins. So when there is already a forward trend movement in this, getting our source ingredients indigenously at a cheaper cost will significantly bring down the price of these products, right? So on that part of the value chain, we're sort of meeting the price on the taste or what we do typically, and all of you guys are experts at it, but meeting that taste parity is where innovation comes, right? Like a lot of, so once your ingredients are priced below, you have a little bit more wiggle room to look at some innovations to match that taste, to match taste of different palates. So if you're looking at like Rashmit's focusing on Mexican food, looking at innovations that come on, can follow on that aspect. Convenience as an ecosystem in India is already being built, right? Aarohi mentioned quick commerce. This is a parallel entire ecosystem that's being built in India, and that's why we're sort of perfectly positioned in a lot of ways where there are parallel ecosystems growing, as well as like interest in innovation coming into this sector. And the most important, government being interested. As recent of a couple of months ago, we had the Bio E3 policy announced, which was estimated to be around 9,000 crores plus. This is released by the Biotech Biorac department, the DBT department. But what's important about this scheme is one of the pillars was smart protein, which until before we did not have a pillar the government outwardly called in terms of innovation to bring into the sector. So a lot of the positive trends are now that for the government, smart protein or plant-based protein is not a foreign term, and which brings about a lot of increment. It doesn't become incremental change, but the delta of change becomes much higher. You have governments understanding it. You have, I mean, incubators working on it. You have government programs focused on scaling up the sector. So there's a sort of a tailwind of like changes that we're expecting in the Indian ecosystem and like tapping into what we're doing well, what our strengths are, particularly in the plant-based side, looking at like the amount of legumes we grow, the number of beans that we grow, climate resistant crops that we grow, and being able to use this at scale to bring the price, taste, and convenience parity in the plant-based sector is definitely some of the larger trends that we see. I hope that's a bit clear. I'm happy to elaborate on further points and yeah.
No, I think right. The three pillars are totally perfect and credible. Taste, price, and convenience. It's just food. We have to separate the positive externality and the mission from the end product. That is what drives the space, right? Be it animal ethics, be it environment sustainability, or be it health. That it can vary for different startups or the companies. That's the fuel. That's internal fuel. But for the consumers, it is a afterthought. I think they would like to feel well about it and feel happy about it, provided their value is maximized in terms of price, taste, and convenience. So we have very little funding in this space. Forget about companies. The space in India has got next to nothing in terms of funding, and
Very
it
good
has
point.
we are next to
And sorry,
nothing.
Abhishek, I just want to add one more point to that. And that's something very important for everyone to know is is as a climate solution, the smart protein industry is severely underfunded compared to, let's say, other sectors such as like EV or like solar or even like renewables. The all protein sector is definitely underfunded. And that's one big chunk of what the next levels of trends are going to be is how do we move a huge chunk of money that's available for climate resilience or climate action into a space that is extremely forward in terms of how much climate mitigation.
And
Apologies for
this
cutting you off,
and this is
Abhishek.
where the problems are. See, we are fighting a battle on so many fronts with next to no ammunition, right? And people who had ammunition, like recently, obviously, there are news that Unilever is divesting, looking to divest his business to JBS, Vegetarian Butcher. I think, as a leading FMCG global player, I think they should have sustained, and they were doing fairly well. Vegetarian Butcher is one of the top performing companies in the world in this space. Amazing team, amazing product, winning in Europe, Western Europe, being in Burger King, Subways, doing really, really well. But Unilever did not leverage its distribution into India, Southeast Asia, US, also very little visibility, Southeast Asia, China. So Western Butcher brand was not cultivated. And now, if people with resources are, moving away from this space, then it is incumbent upon very small players like us to really keep up the fight. So I think this, and then for government, right? We don't want grants because the space will grow. There is a latent potency because otherwise we'll just be seeing as something which needs to be just slightly encouraged. But the kind of challenges we are facing, we are seeing bird flu playing havoc in the US market. In the poultry, past 1.5 year, they have been unable to control it and now spread to the dairy industry en masse in the US. Imagine if that hits in the Indian market. Already certain states are experiencing, started to experience bird flu. What happens to the livelihood? What happens to the food security and also the health security? So it's like the house is on fire, and but we are just putting one mug of water into the massive fire. So that's not enough. So that is the context we are working in, and a lot of companies in this space also need support because what happens is that think about a soy milk, right? It's very easy to get to a cost of a soy milk. You buy soy, put it in water, you drain it out, you make the milk and you just add the cost. But for a company, that's not the ultimate cost. And that's why so many companies are shutting down. If they are charging a premium, if they would have been charging a premium, they would have survived. They're not even surviving. So I see a lot of complaint by, a lot of consumers that they are charging a premium. They're out here to make money. No, they're not here to make money. They're putting their life savings into it and efforts, and they are closing shop. So this is no way to support a movement. And this is where I would like to bring it, Rashmit. How do, which impact areas young activists and young consumers can, enter and create an impact in this particular field?
Yeah. So, great points by all of you. Now, when it comes to youth, um, it's true, right? So, firstly, right, like I want to, like, I think when we talk about these issues, we need to think about the core of the problem, right? So, for example, when COVID hit, right, this movement itself, we were very quick to say, okay, the core of the problem is animal agriculture, right? Or, well, it was wild farms in that case, but with bird flu, the core of the problem is animal agriculture, right? Like if we were to get rid of that, we would solve all of it. But I think, like to me, the core of the problem, even beyond that, is demand, right? Because as long as there's demand in the markets for these things, right, they are going to get produced no matter what uh, we want, right? Like, however positively we want to think about it, the core of the issue is demand because in an economic system, supply follows demand. It's not that if everyone started consuming oat milk today, they wouldn't keep farming dairy cows because why would they do that? If the demand isn't there, if the demand shifts, then you're onto something else. So for me, right, like I think the youth and young animal activists, I think the major area that they need to be working on is demand creation, and that works primarily, in my opinion, in two sectors, right? So one is education, right? So increasing awareness right, is something that we are lacking in, right? But also like just changing perceptions of veganism and plant-based foods, right? So in my opinion, social media is just so powerful, right? We don't realize the impact that it's having on the generations of tomorrow, right? Gen Z, Gen Alpha, right? They are heavily influenced by what is happening on social media, and I don't think that the movement is doing enough to make plant-based eating appealing and sexy and attractive to these people, right? It's not cool to eat plant-based. So, okay, let me differentiate a bit. Oat milk dairy alternatives are cool, right? There is a like a coolness associated with them, but plant-based protein not so much. So one thing that I think that we could do is like or young people should be doing is creating content that is very that makes the space feel cool, right, and attractive to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and also to young parents, right? Like so, people who have young children, people who will face the who will create this next wave of consumption that will come, right? So if those people need to be influenced. So that's one area, but also to leverage third, like external trends. So like you guys talked about lactose intolerance earlier, right? So I think working backwards from other problems, like whether it's lactose intolerance, PCOS, or whatever, and arriving at veganism as a solution, right? Or a plant-based alternative as a solution will open up the market more also. So yeah, I would say these things, creating like these mass relatable narratives that feed into like veganism, that will really help grow the movement.
No, I
And I
think
think
fair.
youth should be focusing on that. Yeah.
No, I think fair points, Rashmit. So obviously on the demand side and what the young activists can do, I think very, very valid points. And also, we have to understand that in the space is not operating in isolation, right? And space is potentially very disruptive to entrenched big economic interest and big economic investments, right? All of us, people who are deep into the space know that soy is one of the most complete plant protein with all essential amino acid and with pdcas value even better than chicken, with protein digestibility even better than chicken, right? But normally if you ask anyone, they say that soy has got estrogen, whereas it has got phytoestrogen, which is plant estrogen. So they will not let you create the content on its own. For every new content created, there will be hundreds of counter contents which will spread the myth. So we need more and more youngsters to really put it out there and be vocal about it. I totally agree on that. And secondly, and that's the youngster part, again the other part is investor and the companies, right? They have to take care of the supply side. If it is available, so imagine if soya chap is not available in Delhi, how will they try it? Since it's not available in Bangalore or Chennai as easily, so it's not as popular, right? It's not that there's no demand. Just to give a case in point, very few people know that India did not have tea earlier, right? So there was an opium war in China, and Britishers could not send to China, so they gave free tea for months and months into interior parts of India, and we developed into the habit of having tea. Closer to our times, Maggie. Nestle had free distribution of Maggie in Maggie quiz contests in schools and all. So the supply created the demand also. So even though the demand can create the supply, but that is from a consumer perspective, but from a company and investor perspective or the policymaker perspective, they can create the supply and that will create its own demand. So, that both together, along with the advocacy, I think can really help the movement a lot. Now, I'll bring in Aarohi. Aarohi, you are in the plant-based startup space, right? And it's not easy. We talked about that the funding is absolutely minimal in India if we talk about it. So how do you scale up your operation considering there is so much little funding? So how do you first of all, how do you survive, and then how do you scale up?
Good question, Abhishek. You're totally right. I mean, uh, plant-based, I mean, funding in plant-based industry is quite limited. We've been trying and we've been seeing the shift in a positive way. Uh, However, like bootstrapping a plant-based starter means you have to be really, really creative. So what we have done in Dancing Cow is relied very heavily on partnerships. We collaborate with cafes, we collaborate with fitness studios. And as Rashmit also mentioned, matcha, we collaborate with a lot of matcha brands because they've already built a certain niche around them, which is very similar to our. So number one, we believe a lot in collaborations and partnerships with creators and also other brands who are doing something very similar to catering to the same kind of audience as us. Sorry, my answer will be very marketing oriented because I'm from a marketing background, so that's why I have a lot of areas.
Relevant. I think that's important. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, we collaborate with a lot of fitness studios and influencers who align with our values. They'll introduce your product to the right audience, without needing massive ad spend. Secondly, we've seen that sampling is also a game changer. If people taste your product and love it, they'll truly come back. For example, we do a lot of pop-ups, giveaways, and we do a lot of targeted sampling at our partner cafes and collaborators, so that people can try the product firstly. I think this should be given. Like if you are out there selling your products for the first time, you need people to try the products first, and sampling should be first or second priority while you're starting your new venture and want to scale it.
Sure.
Of course, there's digital as well. I mean, running smart, hyper targeted, like really, uh, persona focused Meta and Google ads combined with WhatsApp marketing or a CRM focused approach would be very effective than, spending on traditional medias and relying truly on, word to word, mouth to mouth marketing. Because email and WhatsApp campaigns have worked really good wonders for us. They, keep your audience engaged, and they are very cheap also. They don't cost a lot. And I would say finally, the power of community. Like for a new brand, building the community affinity is very important. You really need to engage with your early adopters, and you really need to build a loyal fan base through storytelling. And it really makes a huge difference in the category where trust is everything. So storytelling through your journey, storytelling, you're creating a community around what you're building, what your vision is, because they will be your biggest influencers moving forward. So I believe without a lot of funds, you can do great wonders with the company if you do it creatively.
No, I think very well said, Aarohi. I think it's a mix of all the strategies, and you have to be smart about it. You have to be capital efficient about it because the space doesn't have money to burn, right? So community plays a very big role in amplifying whether they consume the product or not. That's one thing, but at least they can amplify the voice. And normally it so happens that any space, think about it, when a child is just born and is trying to take a baby steps, people are not judgmental, right? You are supportive. So the space itself, be it plant-based meat or dairy, is in infancy. They uh, will fall down, they'll commit mistakes, they will, some of them will not survive, some of them will try to make a mark. So I believe, you cannot, keep the companies with the same set of, benchmarks as a well established, well capitalized companies, right? So I think there has to be some support and tolerance, for the mistakes and support for the success. I'm very happy that recently, I think in plant-based dairy, Nourish You just raised 16 crore, and that too from SIDBI Ventures, which is again a government sector lending bank. So I think that augurs well for the plant-based dairy space. So we need such success stories, however big, small, medium we have. And therein, a lot of organizations like GFI, PBFIA, and even animal organization like PETA, MFA, so they can amplify some of these successes because companies don't have the bandwidth to reach in terms of amplification of their successes. So that is definitely going to be important. So Aiyanna,
Abhishek,
where, yeah, sorry,
just
carry
one
on.
sec. I'd like to hear your take on this as well, because I know you guys have scaled up to a certain point now, but you
Yeah.
did go through those initial startup stages that we are going through right now. So, like I'd love to hear your take on this. How did you guys get through, those
So
times?
Uh, so I think it's a very again it's a personal take. Obviously, it may be applicable, may not be applicable for everyone. In fact, there was I saw a question from Deepak Srivastav also. So he also wanted to understand what are the problems in the space, and if someone really without having the food tech background want to partner with it, how to manage the failures, because that is going to happen, right? So this is where it's important that your why needs to be clear. Our why was very clear from day one, and it's very clear. And we have, because we are bound by NDA, we cannot disclose some of the amazing lucrative offers we have given up within India, outside of India, because we felt that this may, just take us away from our, core mission. And we are not grown to the stage that it can go on an autopilot mode. We have to be on top of it. So you have to keep your overheads low. You have to go to the basics. Essentially, have confidence that, okay, this space and this product has got certain merit for an average consumer. Yeah, as I said, you have to be driven by your value, but you should not be blinded by your value. सो यू हैव टू सी कि बॉस, ये जो प्रोडक्ट है ये एक टोटली सेल्फ ओरिएंटेड कंज्यूमर को अपील करेगा या नहीं करेगा, एंड मे नॉट अपील टू एवरी कंज्यूमर. सो यू हैव टू पिक योर बैटल्स. कि मेरा अगर प्रोडक्ट, सपोज वी मैनेज टू मेक अ प्रोडक्ट विच वाज शेल्फ स्टेबल. आई थिंक देयर वाज अनदर क्वेश्चन from someone regarding shell stability, Pradeep Yara. He asked कि shell stable रहना पड़ेगा because you cannot then go out of the metros. And again, we are missing the point. A lot of data which is publicly available is for the metros. And we started from the tier 2, tier 3 cities, even rural parts of India. And that is where we still have our maximum sales. You can go to a Dantewada in Chhattisgarh or a Nagaland or a Kerala or a Samastipur in Bihar. Good dot products are being sold because we have a great distribution partner who has strength in those areas. But the product acceptance is there. How could that happen? Because हमें एक technological barrier था कि we cannot make a frozen product. We cannot be able to sell to Samastipur or a Port Blair a frozen product in a small volume, not possible. So we developed that technology, shelf stability. उसके कारण we are able to appeal to go to those places. Also, we when we raised our last fund, with Six Sense Ventures in 2021, so we had decent money, and next deals, next rounds were also being structured. So we knew there was more money incoming. So we went a bit ballistic on modern trade, brand endorsements, and even quick commerce. उस समय Swiggy Instamart ने start किया था वहाँ की listing. We got listed in all Reliance and all DMart. Right, we recruited 150 promoters, we recruited 16 sales managers, but next funding nahi hua, so we blew through that money, most of it. Then we had to go back to the drawing board ki bhai aise to nahi chalega, will burn out. So we have to be sustainable. So we focused on improving the product. Ki hamara jo initial set of products tha, which many of the products what you see on our website, uh, some of our latest products are not there in retail sale, they are in B2B. सो हमने क्या किया कि यार खर्चा कम करना है लेकिन कंज्यूमर तक पहुंचना है. अब अपना ब्रांड और अपने एक्सपोजर से तो पहुंचाने में कॉस्ट लगेगा. सो क्रिएट अ वैल्यू प्रोपोजिशन, गो टू सम ऑफ द ब्रांड्स हु ऑलरेडी हैव अ कंज्यूमर कनेक्ट, लाइक टिप्स फ्रैंकी हो गया, अभी ईट फिट वी आर प्रोवाइडिंग सर्टेन प्रोडक्ट्स, लीला, ताज, मैरियट, स्मॉल कैफेज, रेस्टोरेंट्स. So we are providing the protein, and then once we sell them our product and convince them, then that product becomes theirs. Then we are creating our collaborators with a very low capital outlay, and they are creating the category. As I said, the category has got no money. So how do you create the category? So, and all this while, and it has not been easy. Any startup, let alone a new category startup, में तो ऊपर नीचे होगा. It will be crest and troughs. So what keeps you grounded is why. So like personally, I feed animals daily, around 2.5 hours every day since years. So every day when you see a blind cow getting fed, or maybe a dog giving birth and the puppy dying, so you get connected to your why on a daily basis. You have to be strategic about your business. But if you are fighting for the animals, then you can't take no for an answer. You can't be a Unilever giving up vegetarian butcher. You cannot. Either you will succeed or you will, die trying to succeed. That's all. So there's no other two ways out of it, and that gives you a lot of conviction, because then even the bad times are not bad times anymore, because you still sleep well. कि मतलब अपना खर्चा तो कोई भी निकाल लेगा, कोई नौकरी भी करेगा, जो भी घर का खर्चा निकाल लेगा. अब बिजनेस सक्सेसफुल होता है या नहीं होता है, उससे स्पेस क्रिएट हो सकता है, उससे कैटेगरी क्रिएट हो सकता है, एंड यू आर, आपको अपना पावर भी पता है, आपका पावरलेसनेस भी पता है. You are not everything, you don't have that kind of money, but if God is on your side and thinks, he wills this space to be created, it will be created. Whether Good Dot is instrumental in this or not, I don't know, or someone else comes and really takes away the space and creates the category, still it's good, it's a win. But everyone needs to succeed in this space, everyone has to fight for the right things. And क्या होता है कि बहुत लोग, lot of people, some people who came in the space just came for the money part, just came for the hype part. And that also includes some of the largest FMCG players, even in India. They just dip their toes with no conviction. They price their product twice or thrice than the meat products. So कौन खरीदेगा? Imagine करो, if I am a big FMCG player, I am not manufacturing the product, मैं किसी से product ले रहा हूँ, फिर कहीं से प्रोसेस करा रहा हूँ, दोनों का प्रॉफिट जोड़ रहा हूँ, फिर अपना प्रॉफिट मार्जिन जोड़ रहा हूँ, एंड कंज्यूमर को बोलता हूँ कि यू पे अप. अगर मैगी फर्स्ट डे में वो करता, नेस्ले करता, तो मैगी तो कोई खाता नहीं. तो मैगी ने सब्सिडाइज किया कि भैया कॉस्ट इसका 5 रुपए का, मैं आपको 2 रुपए में दे रहा हूँ, खाओ, दो फ्री में दे रहा हूँ, खाओ, गेट यूज टू इट. So no one did that heavy lifting, and they are giving away, they are saying, and kya big names failing in the space creates a very bad media bites कि ये दम ही नहीं है, स्पेस में दम नहीं है. अरे दम नहीं है तो why, how can Good Dot do whatever we are doing with limited resources? And it's not for 1 year, we have been doing it for so many years, and we are growing. So if a big player comes in with conviction, they can grow hundreds of times more than us. But where is the conviction? उनको तो नेक्स्ट शेयर होल्डर मीटिंग में, क्योंकि बेस दूसरे का बड़ा है, मान लो डिटर्जेंट का बड़ा है या इसका बड़ा है, बेस बड़ा है, उसमें 2% भी ग्रोथ होता है, दे कैन शो द नंबर्स. यहाँ पे तो स्पेस ही इतना छोटा है कि, एंड देयर टाइमलाइंस आर सो स्मॉल कि मैं 2 साल में हो सकता है छोड़ के जाऊँ कंपनी. कौन 5 साल का कौन इन्वेस्टमेंट करे? So this is where I think passionate, driven people, you are doing a great job. All of you are doing a great job because you're convinced about, all of us want to earn money, right? अपना घर तो चलाना है. लेकिन while working for that, if it is making sense, there's nothing better than this. So I think this space is a great space for anyone who is interested, but they have to be ready for the long grind. अगर उनको चाहिए कि मैं परेशानी नहीं झेलना चाहता हूँ, then this is definitely not the space. एब्सोल्युटली नॉट द स्पेस, क्योंकि ये स्पेस में अभी इट्स अ वॉर में कैजुअलिटी भी होगा, प्रॉब्लम भी आएगा, रिसोर्सेज भी नहीं होगा, घास का रोटी भी खाना पड़ेगा, खाओ, रेडी रहो, अदरवाइज डोंट. बहुत सारे अदर अपॉर्चुनिटीज हैं, बट दैट्स आवर स्टोरी, एंड वी आर लकी, वी आर ग्रेट टीम, कन्विंस टीम. 250-300 लोग हमारे यहाँ साथ हैं, वर्किंग कंटिन्यूअसली फॉर years, एंड दे आर डिलीवरिंग. सो ठीक है, राइट नाउ तो अभी चल रहा है, हु नोज द फ्यूचर, बट या.
Can I
Anyway,
just add one
yeah,
point? Sorry, Abhishek, that was so well put. I just want to add one point from looking at the sector as a whole. And this is a question that keeps coming up to me is something for the audience and entrepreneurs there and just activists there. What we're trying to do in this sector is reinvent 120-year-old already established supply chain. If you
yeah,
think about how easily we get our wheat, our chapati, our meats, it's it was being built 120 years ago. It started from there. Then because industrialization came up, and then supply chains around the world. I mean, we get like exotic fruits on Blinkit in 10 minutes. So what we really have to understand is the what we're trying to replace is something that took 120 years to build, right? And it's going to take some time. And I thought it was so important that you mentioned you got to stick to your why. You know that this supply chain is not sustainable. It's not something that's good on your why, and continuing on that path, knowing that path is super important. And of course, it will take time, but I think that the number of people, number of innovators, number of trendsetters in the sector that will definitely get us to that supply chain value uh, that is sustainable, that our food ecosystem is just and supply is also just. So thanks for that, Abhishek. I just wanted to add on.
No, no, thank you, Ayana. I think it's all relevant and it's great. Abhi, right now, yes, everyone is working for their profession or business, but there are very few causes which are left, you know, untouched. I think we know, colonialism is gone, slavery is gone, women empowerment is there. Those things are. This is the last battle for justice, and very few people are actually fighting for it, let alone fighting, they are not even acknowledging it. So whether we are instrumental in actually changing it or not is a very difficult question to answer, but this is a fight worth fighting, that is very, very clear. So I think this is really relevant. And just Ayana, just to come back to you also, what do you think which are the high impact area for students in the space where they can contribute in this space?
Right. I would talk about, I mean, from a student, and this is from a student, from a young entrepreneur lens, something that is a big bottleneck for us as we look into the sector is evidence-based policy. And what I mean by that is generating some level of evidence on anything that you do, right? Like, and a lot of my panelists here have done so, right? Even if it's small number of data creation, what happens is as a sector to speak on, when you have the right type of data to look at and to back that up, the changes or the delta of change becomes much higher. So I would tell a lot of activists in terms of whatever you're doing to gather that data. And it's very hard. It's not an easy thing for a young entrepreneur to do. You have 100 things falling on your plate. You have your marketing to worry about. You have your supply chain to worry about. But a very important aspect of scaling this sector up is generating that data. And the reason why we insist, at least from a sector-wide perspective, and what a lot of what GFI India does is to collect this data, or make data dark places a little bit more data light, to create an evidence pool to show and back, let's say, policy advocacy, or to go to the government and say, hey, this is a potential problem that you could solve. And it's super, super important that at any level of implementation that you do, gathering that data is super important. And it could be even starting a restaurant, it could be doing a D2C product, you could do a B2B product. And I think that goes a long way. And of course, some of them can be secrets held to yourself. Of course, you are a business and a business is a business, but for definitely activists, the young entrepreneurs, this is a critical area that I see, and as the GFI India as a whole see as places that we can really be influential. And for activists in the room, I think, as Abhishek perfectly mentioned at the start of the thing, is to look at this data, take it and apply it, right? A lot of this data is not at today's data. It might have been collected in 24, 2023. There are changes, and to look at that data, make good decisions based on that data, as well as collecting and sharing is also very, very critical for the sector's growth. So the longer we do that, and I think it gets to a point where then it's a snowball effect, right? Like data is then collected at all levels and there is impact later. We're yet to reach there, and that is something that I would highly advise for anyone getting into the sector is to be a co-principal or a small part of the principles of what work.
No, I think very relevant. And क्या होता है ना, because I say someone, see, there are two kind of people. Someone who wants to take the problem head on, right? Whatever be the cost. So, we are welcome to join the plant-based dairy or the meat space because it's a war. It's a war with absolutely no resources, right? But it's a very important war you have to fight. That's one. But even otherwise, I'll take the liberty of deconstruct the session topic also. If suppose for a young entrepreneur or youngster who wants to help in the cause, not directly fight the cause, is also, enter any space which is by default plant-based. You can start, say, a Chinese noodles cart. You can start a pani puri cart. You can start anything which is by default vegan, idli sambar, anything. You need not really, tackle the problem head on. There is an opportunity because that will grow the tribe of such plant-based businesses. That will grow very clear messaging and make it very relatable to consumers that plant-based is not something which is trendy, cool, out there, snobbish. That is very integral part of day-to-day life. Let's not vilify it. Let's not either demonize it or even anglicize it. Don't Let's not do that. So I think there could be a very safe route. because आप वो भी कर सकते हो. So that's for the advice to youngsters, that you pick your cause, because it's not going to be easy. That will be relatively easy, more predictable, but you still will be pushing the wheel. So that's why I sometimes English is a very strange language. It puts guardrails into your thought. When we define a particular term, we are restricted in that particular term, right? A lot of people say that, GMO, right? GMO, when I say, what is a GMO? A crop comes to mind, but not in a typical sense. Chicken is the most GMO product, not in a traditional sense, because it is not naturally available. Even the McDonald's fries, the French fries that you're having, that's not naturally, available. You have created that product in the lab, and obviously named it something else. But that being said, so because English puts that, in a particular direction, so that's why I say plant-based. Just there are certain segments, very important segment, directly addressing animal issues: plant protein, smart protein, plant-based dairy, and plant-based meat. But the rest is also very important, which will normalize it, which will really normalize plant based, not make it cultish. That it's a cult, it's a vegan is a cult, that is a cult. No, it's not a cult. Everyone is a vegan because no one wants to hurt animals. Whether you eat or not is a different thing, because veganism is a belief. It's not, that's a belief, and everyone is a vegan. I am very much sure. Whether my dietary habits or my, day-to-day habits conform to that belief is a different thing altogether. So, but anyway, that is a great. I think we have covered a lot of areas. In the interest of time, I think we have 20 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll pass on the mic to everyone. Okay, based upon your final concluding words, and then we start taking questions if organizers want that. Yeah. So yeah, Aarohi, can you start?
Sure. There's one thing that I missed out while talking about what a new entrepreneur can do while starting out their venture. I feel that a lot of brands have now entered the market without realizing what unique offerings they are launching with. There are a lot of brands entering the same category space with the same similar kind of products. Um, so I feel they need to do a lot of research on the consumers, as Aiyanna has mentioned already. A lot of data and persona mapping can help with this regard, and then also asking the right kind of questions to the consumers as to what they want in their day-to-day lives. Like what kind of products would be that are missing, or there is a white space in the market that they can work on. So I believe a lot of questions, redefining your value proposition. Basically, you go back to the products that you have, and create a value proposition and see what kind of values you want your products to have, which would solve the consumer demand. And I believe that's the way to go forward, because a lot of entrepreneurs, you've mentioned Abhishek, are just there for the money. They enter the market, they realize that the market is not big enough, they leave the market, and that's the end of the space, and that's a lot of negative publicity for the industry as well. So before entering the market, they really need to understand, is this a right product market fit? Do people really want another product in the same category? How their product is different from other product in the same category? I think that should be also, that's a very important thing to think about.
No, I think very well said, Aarohi. I think any business stems from a need. So there has to be a need for that product or service. That should be a start. And before that, you have to have your why. Why you are entering a particular business. Once you enter into a particular business, is there a need for that product or service? And finally, is there a value addition from the existing product or services? So if you have these three in mind, you have to really sort it out in your head. Why, then what are the need in the market, and is there any value differentiation? When you have these three very well thought through, only then you go ahead. Unless you are very clear, don't move to the second step. First you have to get your why and then follow that. So I think very valid point. Otherwise we'll see a lot of saturation in the market with no one actually winning, and the space getting decimated. So I agree with you. on that particular aspect. But I'm sure people are wise to really understand that these advices so that they succeed, not to act any guardrails. Because failure teaches us a lot, and if someone has had adversity, I think they have a lot of insights also. So I think the panel has brought some of those aspects. Yeah. So Rashmit, your parting words, please.
Sure, yeah. So, thank you for moderating, Abhishek. And I just want to say that, so, like, I think in this space among vegans, we don't think about the non-vegans much, right? Like a lot of the messaging is for vegans. The truth of the matter at the end of the day is the number of vegans is very few. So
True.
whatever you're thinking about, right? Any solution to the problem, please think about the non-vegan and how they are perceiving things, right? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones who you need to bring on to our side and to explore, whatever product you're offering or whatever solution you're providing. So please think about that, and also keep in mind that you're in an aspirational country, right? Like India is an aspirational country. So Anupam Mittal, Shark Tank, used this word, and it's been like in my head ever since I heard him say it. But it's so true, right? You're in a country which is where incomes are increasing. You're aspiring to do things that have been defined by the West or by other affluent countries, right? So keeping that in mind, you need to figure out, I think, how can you make veganism and or plant-based eating, for that matter, aspirational, right? Like how can it be something that people aspire for rather than the existing perceptions of veganism or whatever. How do we shift that? And at the end, just for people, I'd like listed a few resources. You guys were talking about students. So if you're looking to gain experience in this space, there are several job portals. 80,000 hours is one that comes to mind. I'm sure GFI also, I think, does things like lists jobs in the space. So just, there's some resources out there where you can go work in the space, or, I suggest it's great to even work for the other side, right? If you can see how they function, right? That will bring insights that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And just a couple of podcasts that I would like to recommend to everyone. One is Eat for the Planet by Neil Zacharias. So he's been the recent series. Initially, it used to just interview like startup founders, but now they've been really getting into the nitty gritty of the psychology behind this movement and like what is driving change. So the recent episodes of that podcast and Nudge by Phil Agnew. I think everyone should be listening to this podcast. It is about behavioral science. It's about how consumer behavior in the real market works, and just it's brilliant. So check out these podcasts and make sure you keep expanding your knowledge base to because that's what will help the movement grow.
No, thank you, Rashmita. If you could type in the podcast names on the chat for the audience, I think it'll be relevant. Definitely. So, Aiyanna, coming back to you. Yeah, your parting words.
Always hard to go go last because I thought what everyone put on the plate was so useful and so relevant. I think I will leave you with one aspect, and again, coming from overview of the sector, um, there's just been a recent as we look at ecosystems as a whole, any business trend we need to consider it like a vector, right? In one way, once it creates a vector that goes a certain way, that creates a vacuum or an aspect that in terms of the vector going the other way. So the basis is this: meat production, dairy production is continuing to rise, and it will rise for the next couple of years. We're seeing trends around the world. More people, as economies grow, as people become more richer, the propensity to eat higher protein meals, higher meat is going to rise. But similarly, like that vector conundrum, that creates an opportunity, it creates an equal equilibrium of like vacuum of an opportunity that I think is there for the taking. And using India's strengths, using India's huge agrarian population, using India's ability, the number of culturally different food that we have, using that as an advantage is something I think a lot of actors in India working or going into the sector as a B2C or B2B aspect is very, very important. And I think from a business sense, from an entrepreneurial lens, understanding that although it might not all look positive right now, but there is a huge vacuum space that can be filled and can be filled in a way that will create a just and equitable food ecosystem in the future. I hope that captures my thoughts. Thank you.
No, I think very well said. I think, guys, you have put it all well. I think your experience has shown through. And, as I said, it's a nascent stage and this will keep evolving. But I do believe that through this panel, we have managed to share what is the current learning, what we have done based upon our successes, failures, setbacks, as well as achievements. So I think, we'll like to take now the audience question and answers. I think last 15 minutes. I do believe Manisha had addressed one question to us at Good Dot, that what has been Good Dot's experience in rural India. So Manisha, I think rural India has been the most instrumental part in Good Dot's growth story. That's the maximum sales what we have got in the past 7 8 years of our existence is semi-urban and rural parts of India. And this is where, again, this is where I say that we have to go away from the guardrails. India exists across in the metros, in the tier 2, tier 3 and rural parts of India. And in fact, they are hungry for, in this day and age of internet, social media, they know what's happening and no one is catering to their needs in those markets. So if you, it's very easy to, if you give value, as Aarohi pointed out, if you're giving value to the consumers, they will lap it up. So we have been really successful and we are thankful that our brand visibility, our brand presence is maximum in tier 2, tier 3 cities, even though we are doing all right in the metros, but that is our basic foundation on which we have built Good Dot. So very 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 exciting. That gives us hope, and that is why I don't take a say a US based assessment of the space based upon a certain company's stock market performance. I said, no, you don't know, this is different, that is different. So again, so that is, I hope that answers to your question, and I think India is a very interesting market for this. So we have another question from Bangalore. So it is there are a lot of myths around ultra processed nature of plant-based protein alternatives. So anyone wants to go on that? So anyway, I'll take that question. So basically, guys, please understand that the sugar you eat, it was not white, crystalline. The salt you eat was not in that form. The bread you eat has gone through many processes. So in this day and age, I think again, these are the myths very well propagated by the animal industry. I would say the most ultra processed thing are the meat filled with antibiotic growth hormones, non-natural chicken, poultry farm with great zoonotic factors risk always there. So that being said, if you look at the ingredient list, there is a gradation, right? If you look at a cookie, right, a cookie made in a bakery shop or maybe an Oreo will be very different in terms of the ingredient list. So you have to go through the ingredient list. Many of the products, see, for example, formed products, so they're different products. Extruded products are which are not bound by, say, methyl cellulose. That's one of the binder which is used. Again, methyl cellulose is not bad because it's made from bark of a tree, but then again, it sounds very fancy, it sounds very alien, so that is why it's very easy to attack. But there are a lot of products which will not have some of the aggressive ingredients or maybe some of the not so great ingredients. If you look at the process of plant-based meat, it is nothing but a thermal process through extrusion, where heat and pressure are applied on plant protein to get that layer. I'll explain to you the science, which is simple. The technology is complicated. I'll explain to you the science of plant-based meat, right? What happens is that there's something called denaturation of protein. If you look at egg in a shell and you boil it, it becomes solid. I have not processed anything in that protein. What has happened, the amino acid linkage of egg changes on application of temperature and it realigns in different layer. But if you look at a dough, if you make a wheat dough, it get extended in different areas. But if you actually use a protein dough, and put it under temperature and pressure in extruder, it gets realigned in layers like meat. So you start with soya flour, soya protein, pea protein, and all those ingredients, and you will make it a dough, fibrated dough, and you run through an extruder. So soya chunks, no one has said soya chunk is processed till date. I haven't heard anyone saying soya chunk is processed. It's similarly the same process with different ingredient and different technology. That's just about it. So yes, it is processed, just like a sugar is processed, just like a salt is processed. So the best thing is whole food, plant-based, no processing. Eat vegetables, fruits, by far the best. Grains, whole cereals, best. But if you're talking about what it is pitted against, other products, meat products, it is healthier. It has got zero cholesterol. It has got great dietary fiber, good protein content. So essentially, and what is the litmus test of any good product is basically when you eat it, how do you feel? Can you digest it properly? So you do one thing, you take a plant protein curry and you take a mutton curry, eat it, you will feel hungry easier after few hours in the plant protein curry. Whereas when you eat meat, you'll be filled till your neck for at least 4, 5, 6 hours. So your body takes time for it to digest. So I'm not saying it's a choice of a consumer, but then again, there is certain merit in calling it processed, but I don't see a merit in calling it ultra processed. So that's based upon our experience at Good Dot. But again, these are the things you need to counter, because these are propagated, and the more they are propagated, the truth goes out of the window, and that becomes the truth, and that is happening. But then again, we can do what we can do.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. And I just complimenting everything Abhishek said. I've shared a few resources that put this down on paper. It is about education. It's about a biggest, at least in in economies where this is more of a market share, that, and I put that in brackets in terms of like Europe or the US. One of the bigger things that they're dealing with is consumer adoption and the point of like ultra processed. I mean, no one questions about chapatis ultra processed, right? Like, I mean, but that's the thing. These are the questions the sector as a whole faces, and education and educating yourself, as well as like when you do have this conversation with people, pointing to like facts that you know, and like sharing this in a very open manner for everyone to understand is a critical barrier to consumer adoption, which is very very relevant for the sector. But nothing more to add on that one. I hope that's clear.
Sure. So there's another question from Bangalore, which talks about businesses which don't care about animal welfare and veganism are entering into the plant-based food sector and selling products at high prices to make profits. For example, some brands of soy tofu are more expensive than paneer. Do you think these type of business practices are the reason for this type of market to fail? Aarohi, you want to take that question?
Yeah, Abhishek. So, I mean, it all boils down to the same thing that we've already spoken about. So, intent and asking your why in before entering the market is very crucial. Like, if I personally believe that if you're not passionate about the cause, if you're not passionate about the why, then you're likely to fail, because this war that Abhishek you've mentioned is going to continue for a very long time, and you really need to have that patience and that grit in order to continue. The brands who are entering and charging premium, I don't want to comment on that, comment on those brands. But ultimately, if they lack the personal reason of entering the market, I don't think that it is a sustainable business for them in the longer run. I may be wrong. There are a lot of brands in the plant-based dairy market, not in India, but in Singapore, and I've seen some in Europe that have entered market, and they're also consuming dairy. The founders are not very passionate about, the welfare of the dairy industry or anything. They're just simply doing it to cater to the current lactose intolerant consumers. Um, However, for plant-based meat industry specifically and plant-based protein, I would say a certain level of answering your why is also very important. If your why is something else, then and it makes sense for you, then I think that the business would make sense for you. But then in order to continue for 10 years, 15 years, and make a profitable and successful business out of it and sustainable business out of it, I don't think that, you know, non-passionate founders for the industry can sustain for a very long run.
Oh. No, I
If
think,
I can add to that,
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Abhishek. So I think I agree with what Aarohi is saying to an extent, but I think it's a bit more complicated, right? Because there are founders with a really strong why. Let's say Abhishek, or like let's look at Chetran Foods, right? Wherein Chetran sells tofu at dirt cheap prices, right? Or even Good Dot for that matter, right? Your Pro Chap range, right, for Horeca is incredibly affordable, right? So you have, these companies that are really driven by the vibe, but then there's, on the other hand, these other entrants, right, who are entering, right, but they see it more of as a low volume, high margin product because they need to charge that price because the volumes are relatively low. But in the case of Good Dot, and Chetrans, they see it as a high volume, low margin product. Like I think that's how I would differentiate it. I don't think they're doing it intentionally. I think they're doing it to survive to an extent, because the FMCG industry is brutal.
No, I agree with both of you and totally resonate with it. That, if that were the case, many companies would not shut shop, right? They can't even survive, let alone make money. So I think it's a tough field. And everyone, see, there are two kind of people, rather three kind of people in this space. One is legacy players, and they have enough money. And if they are charging much more premium, I think they are to be blamed because they are not helping the creating the category. Definitely wrong. But we come to two other granular kind of people that who is a small startup. One is driven from a passion, and another is from the money perspective. Both of them are fine. Both of them are really helping the space and creating the consumer category. And a rising tide will lift all the ships. So we can support them, but there are so many costs which a normal layperson will not really understand. There can be a wastages, recall of the product, packaging, rentals, so many taxes, so many costs are involved, that it's very difficult to really pinpoint. And eventually consumers are the last word. If they accept the value proposition, they'll buy, otherwise they'll reject. So I think we have to be a bit more kinder to entrepreneurs in the space. It's not easy for them. What about the inflated pricing sentiment they create? It's not inflated as it's the fact is, first of all, anyone putting for example, say oatish, right? Creating oat milk, right? From oats, the raw material costs are not as significant, but then there can be a co-packer margin, there can be a packaging material, there'll be a transportation, there will be a cost to pay. So no one wants to charge a premium which a consumer will not accept. Ideally, agar if say a Otish, ideally, in a dream world, would like to price it half the cost of milk, because then they will win. They will go all over the country, but they cannot. So even though the sentiment, this is where all of you also need to step in to really understand that this is just a time where they have to survive. If scales picks up, automatically their purchase cost will go down, their overheads will get distributed in that particular large sale number. So overall, I think so I don't know about Chetran's example. Someone has asked, Manisha, ki tofu and curd in particular, so there could be wastages, there could be transportation, refrigerated transportation, because many a times आपको पनीर locally मिलता है या अमूल का मिलता है, established network है. For Chetan to send a paneer to say, or a curd to say Udaipur, there will be significant cost and wastages. So, जैसे take our example, Good Dot, right? Some of the products what you see on the website are not the most affordable out there because they are cost. Amazon takes delivery cost. There is a recall. There is a COD. Also, there are our own packaging cost. But when in B2B, in the raw naked format, we just charge a cost plus method, and that is why it's half the cost of chicken, because we can do that. We don't want to charge anyone any premium. We want to do a scale, because we are not linked to profit, we are linked to more volumes. क्योंकि ज़्यादा वॉल्यूम होगा तो ज़्यादा जानवर बचेंगे, and we'll take them out from the food system. So I agree. It's again, someone as Deepak has said, milk is heavily subsidized by government. Yes, legacy infra भी है, taxes नहीं है, zero taxes है बहुत सारे प्रोडक्ट में. हमारे सारे प्रोडक्ट्स पे 18% के आसपास taxes है. So it's not easy. I think I'm telling you, unless people are really driven, profit तो अभी कोई बना नहीं रहा. It would very easy to give up. Unilever gave up. Vegetarian butcher. What more can you say? It's really tough. So that is why I say ki we need to. So we have just 1 minute left. I think I like to conclude. We have taken. So we have 5 o'clock. Sorry. So I think I'd like to thank everyone, including the audience, to attend this event. I really enjoyed moderating the session. Thank you, Aiyanna, and thank you, Aarohi and Rashmit. It has been great. I hope there has been some learning. Obviously, as I said, we'll keep learning, but the space is not going anywhere. And it's a very interesting and important space to really work on. That's my take. Any of you with final, thoughts, or Apurva, you can come in and conclude the session, please.
Thank you so much, Abhishek sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful panel discussion. A huge shout out to all our panelists and our moderator for what was a very, very nuanced discussion that you all had. I personally have a much better understanding of the plant-based protein space thanks to attending this discussion. Could we have the next slide, please? If this is for our audience, if you've enjoyed this session, please take a minute to fill out a feedback form. Feedback forms are very important because they help us know if we were helpful in helping you understand an issue and debate about an issue, and it allows us to improve our programming and events in the future. So you can scan the QR code on the screen to provide your feedback. Next slide, please. We would also like to thank our sponsors, ProVeg International, as well as Animal Law and Policy Network for supporting this event. The next few slides contain some information about upcoming events that are being organized by the organizers of today's event. The first event is the third annual Comparative Animal Law Postgraduate Workshop that is being co-organized by our colleagues at Animal Law Center in Nalsar University of Law, Hyderabad. Please, if you are interested in animal law, please consider signing up. Can I have the next slide, please? Our partners, Asia for Animals, are organizing 3 online events. They're organizing the International Macaque Week, which is happening in the first week of May, Asia Farm Animal Day on October 10th, and the Farm Animal Coalition regional event in Nepal. So just like an event like this one, but in Nepal at the end of this year. Next slide, please. And the big Asia for Animals event is the AFA conference in Taipei, Taiwan, happening in August. The conference is happening from August 25 to 29. Registration is now open. You can find more details about the conference and more Asia for Animals in-person events on the Asia for Animals website. You can scan this QR code if you're interested in attending any of these events. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We understand your time is important, so we're so grateful that you could take it out to be with us today. We have an exciting day of discussions planned for you all tomorrow, so please join us tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing you there. Wishing you a great day ahead, and we look forward to continuing our work together as we unite our voices for animals. Thank you, and have a nice day.